Welcome back to Ducks Dash, the University of Oregon show on Dash Sports. I'm Izzy LaRue. Here with me is Michael Strite. Let's get into everything Ducks football. So, Michael, like the title says, one more to go, one more game to play. It's a bowl game. Oregon, they found a way to make it into New Year's Six bowl game. Tell me, we're gonna start with the quarterbacks. Who should be the starting quarterback, Michael? Tyler Shuck or Anthony Brown?
Well, we finally got to see Anthony Brown, his first snaps of the season, and it was a weird game for Oregon at the quarterback position because their quarterbacks threw 4 touchdown passes, yet at the same time, it was kind of a bad game for the quarterbacks of Oregon because there was so much struggle there in the second half for Oregon. So let's walk through again Anthony Brown. Transfers, doesn't get to play, finally comes off the bench. First, in a sort of goal line situation, gets the passing touchdown. Then you see him next time he comes out because it's like a 4th and 1, 3rd and 1 situation, picks up the first down. Then when they get down to the goal line again, Anthony Brown picks up his second passing touchdown on the first time that he's played 3 times in a row, 3 plays in a row because they put him in at 1st and goal. So you see that. He plays 3 straight plays in a row, gets his second passing touchdown. And then at the very end of the game, Anthony Brown, for the first time this season, started a drive. He came out at the beginning of a drive because Tyler Shuck, I believe the entire second half, he did not throw the ball past 10 yards downfield. I think he had one awful throw that was nearly intercepted. And besides that, the offense totally gave up on him actually throwing the ball down the field, and you can't do that against Iowa State. You're not going to win the football game if it becomes glaringly obvious that Tyler Shuck has lost the confidence to throw the ball downfield. And that gets tricky because do I feel any better about Anthony Brown in terms of throwing the ball deep? Not really. I still think Tyler Shuck is going to be the quarterback, and I'd like to see him get his confidence back because we know there's a Tyler Shuck in there that could have a great performance, and I think they're going to need that great performance from him. So I don't think Oregon wins this game without a great performance by Tyler Shuck at quarterback. So I think I'm just ready to push my chips in and say, Tyler Shuck, go for it. But I love Anthony Brown, the way that he was being used in the goal line situations. I still want to see that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question. Would you want to see them doing that? And you already answered that question, putting in a mix of Anthony Brown and Shuck. I think, to be honest, why not do that? I mean, it's a really good way to give the offense some more energy when you bring in a new guy and you can maybe do some other stuff that Tyler Shuck can't do because maybe they're worried about Anthony Brown doing something else. And then again, they don't have a lot of film on Anthony Brown too. So always when you bring in a new player, especially at the quarterback position, the defense always kind of looks confused because they're like, oh, what? I didn't study any film on this guy because there was nothing to study on. He didn't play, and then all of a sudden this guy's throwing touchdown passes in his first 3-4 passing attempts. So I think what they need to do, I think what they've already done these past 2 weeks is telling Tyler Shuck, yeah, we know you haven't been really improving throughout the season. It's kind of a regression to a progression, but I think he's been building his confidence back up and seeing that Anthony Brown's in his corner cheering him on, even though he's still wanting to get on the field himself. I mean, having these two guys play together, like switching them in and out of games, like certain goal line situations or certain drives, I mean, that's great because Iowa's defense, even though they saw it a little bit against USC, they definitely won't be expecting it a lot more this game. And also, it was very telling what Joe Moorhead thought about the quarterback situation in the fourth quarter because not a single pass was thrown in the fourth quarter. And Michael, you hardly see that, especially with the quarterbacks that Oregon has right now. You would not expect to see that at all. But I mean, they weren't, like you said, they weren't able to throw down the field that well. And they also wanted to win the game. So they're playing a little conservatively, which almost let USC creep back into the game. But yeah, they just need to get their confidence in these quarterbacks because you cannot win a game if you're not confident in who the quarterback is. Because if you don't put the trust in the quarterback, I mean, the running backs can't win the games by themselves.
Yeah, Joe Moorhead won't say it, but he doesn't have to say it. You can see at the end of the game that he gave up on passing the ball. Other than your checkdowns, your screens, your designed short passes, Joe Moorhead did not have any faith in Tyler Shuck or Anthony Brown to strike, past the first down marker, to make a big throw. And that's such a far cry from the Tyler Shuck of the first 2 games of the season that we were so excited about. That was just diamond, really putting up big numbers, rushing yards, passing yards, tearing up the field. And I think that Tyler Shuck is still in there, and it's definitely just been a confidence issue in terms of declining. And another thing is that a lot of these bowl games, Izzy, they do serve as a window into next year. They're a weird sort of transition between this year and next year. They're kind of in between. And I'm not going to sound the alarm here, but you may be watching Tyler Shuck play his last game at quarterback for Oregon, at least as a starter, right? You don't know what the situation is next year. You don't know whether Tyler Shuck realizes that there's freshmen, quarterbacks coming in to replace him, whether he transfers, whether he fights it out and competes with these 5-star recruits, these 4- and 5-star QBs that are going to be all around him next year. You don't know what all that looks like, but this is a huge, huge game for Tyler Shuck, because if he has another bad performance, you start to see the wheels turning for this being the last time that we see him as the starter for the Oregon football team. And on the other side of the coin, if he comes out and plays incredible, then he sets himself up really well to win that quarterback battle that we know is going to happen next year against these talented freshmen that are coming in like Butterfield.
Yeah, and it's weird because we're going to have these QB battles. We had one this last offseason. We're obviously going to have one another offseason. It's weird. Oregon's going to have a lot of QB battles until one of these 5-star, 4-star recruits emerges as the number one guy, like how Herbert did, working from the bottom of the depth chart, being the number one guy there. So it's going to be interesting to see when the offseason comes to see who's going to be that guy that emerges from the pack and distinguishes himself to be QB1. And honestly, we don't know who that is, because then again, we also have new recruits coming in with Jay Butterfield and Tyler Shuck situation. So we just have to wait that out. But for this game right now, their best bet is to play both these quarterbacks, because if they do not play both these quarterbacks and rely only on Shuck, you're going to see what happened against Oregon State and Cal, a second half performance where this offense does not produce enough to win the game. And Oregon, they cannot do that against this Iowa State team. If they don't put up any points in the second half, they're going to lose the game. Like, it's simple as that. You have to keep scoring to keep up with this Iowa State offense.
Yeah, I expect Iowa State to definitely cause problems with what Oregon is trying to do, and they're going to have a game plan for Tyler Shuck. And Tyler Shuck's got a lot of tape about how to frustrate him and what he can't do. So whatever's in place, Iowa State's going to keep doing that, and it's on Joe Moorhead and Tyler Shuck to break through. And we're going to talk about Oregon being an underdog in this game, but I just think Tyler Shuck performing and not turning the ball over and making big plays is going to be a huge, huge factor in Oregon being victorious.
Yeah, and that brings us to our next topic. What kind of Oregon team will Iowa State face? Because we've seen many different Oregon teams. It's weird. You saw an Oregon team where their offense was just firing off on all cylinders, like they could not be stopped, and then their defense was kind of lacking, and they had to put up all those points in order to win games because their defense was giving up huge amount of points. And then you see in the Cal game where the defense is making stands and getting 3 and outs and getting turnovers, but then the offense just can't do anything with that. And then you get this USC game where it kind of all comes together. Not really, because you see it passing wise, they didn't really come together towards the second half. And then you still don't have CJ Verdell, so you don't have his explosiveness and his running prowess that he has. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of Oregon team Iowa State will face. And I think that's what the coaches are talking to each other about, is like, okay, we have to be ready for the best Oregon team to come out, because we've seen them with an explosive offense with the kind of shutdown defense, not really, but great defense, all defense. So what team do you think is Iowa State will see, Michael?
Yeah, great point. It's been such a weird season for both the offense and defense because you've seen all kinds of different versions of them. We saw a defense that looked really helpless and really struggled. You saw a defense that finally in the USC game and the Cal game had flashes of last year's best in the conference defense that made big plays, made turnovers, and did what they had to do to secure the win when the game came down to it, including 3 interceptions against USC, which is huge for them to finally win the turnover battle. Then you saw an offense that was crazy, video game numbers for the first 2 games, and has been flatlining since. I mean, really, it's impressive that Oregon's offense did what they did against USC and scored enough points to win because of I give all the credit for that to the play calling and Joe Moorhead and Mario Cristobal. I think they beautifully maneuvered their way in that USC game to scoring points, and they went and totally caught fire in the red zone. Oregon got 4 times they entered the red zone and scored 4 touchdowns the first 4 times they got in there, and they wouldn't have won the game if they didn't go 4 for 4 with 4 touchdowns on those red zone trips. And all of that had to come together, Izzy. And I think last time we saw this Oregon team take the field, it was their best game of the season. And it was the first time that I had seen this team play 4 good quarters in a row. They didn't lay an egg in any of the quarters. They put out a good performance throughout the whole game. And even with all that said, I think Iowa State is an even tougher opponent. I don't expect Iowa State to give away 2 interceptions the way that Keaton Slovis did at the beginning of the game. So Oregon has to go out and play their best performance. They need to take what they did against USC and hit a whole nother level. Do you agree with me, Izzy, or do you think there's a possibility for Oregon to sort of weasel their way into a win again, or do they need to just play like we haven't seen them play this entire year?
Well, when you look at that USC game, you talked about their 4 red zone conversions. That was all because of the defense. The defense got the offense into the opponent's field position. They never had to take a drive. The only one drive was from their own 20, 50 to 20-yard line, that in their own field position where they actually scored. The rest was because the defense's turnovers, those 3 picks. It was because of that. So you're looking at it, even though the offense was explosive against Stanford, against Washington State, against UCLA, and it seemed like they could score whenever they got the ball. I mean, right now you're looking at a team that has to have a great defense to give them great field positioning, because if they don't, they might not be able to even get near the end zone. But then you look at it, they have a great kicker too, so then it kind of evens out. But still, like you mentioned, they had to score those 4 touchdowns in order to beat USC because USC was coming back at the end of the game. So for me, it's all about the defense. It's all on the defense. If the defense is great, gets turnovers, gets the offense in great field positioning, and the offense gets going too, scoring touchdowns and staying on the field long drives to get the defense some rest, then, I mean, you see how all perfectly complements each other, right? I mean, defense giving the offense great field positioning, the offense having a longer drive, running the ball more to get the defense some rest, and then defense comes back, do what they need to do again to help the offense. I mean, that's exactly what Oregon needs to do to beat this Iowa State team. You have to have the defense and offense complementing each other in order just to give them a chance against this team.
Yeah, and let's be honest, Izzy, that Jamal Hill interception in the 4th quarter was a very magical play. And Oregon may not be playing in this Fiesta Bowl right now if not for that interception that pretty much nobody except for Jamal Hill thought was an interception. And those are the kind of enormous game-changing plays that win those close games. And you've seen Oregon now. They've had 4, close games that were down to the wire. They lost to Oregon State and they lost to Cal because the offense was just unable to move the ball at all. I mean, those were 2 games where if the offense simply got a couple first downs, they would lock it up. But they weren't able to do that in either of those games. So then you got the UCLA game and the USC game, and the offense didn't do much of anything to seal the deal at the end of the game in those games either, but the defense came up with a huge play. The USC game was obviously Jamal Hill. The UCLA game, it came in the first half, but at the last play of the first half to get a pick six, UCLA wins that game if not for that insane play at the end of the half, and that's just how it goes. So I think Oregon, if they come out and play their best game, they're looking, they're going to give themselves a chance. They're going to put themselves in a circumstance to win the game. But even then, I think we need to see another one of those crazy big plays. There needs to be something huge that happens in that sense. Because if it's a straight up game about which team's better, which team wants it more, which team's going to grind it out, I like what I've seen from Iowa State a little bit more this year, and we'll dive into breaking down Iowa State and the way that their season has gone, as well as Oregon gets to play its first team outside of the Pac-12 this year as well.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think about it. I mean, it takes a bowl game to happen for these teams across the country to play out of conference games. I mean, it's a crazy season to think about that, because, usually you have the preseason, or the non-conference games, like 4 games where you play against schools from other conferences. You travel across the country or they come to you, and then you have your conference games, and then you have the championship game if you make it there, and then bowl game. So you already know you're going to play against different teams. But then this year, it's just all conference games. And now the teams who want to play or got into bowl games are playing against different conferences. So it's nice to see it kind of becoming a little bit more normal, I guess, at the end, just seeing the teams playing out of conference games. But then again, season's been really weird. So it's good to see that normalcy a little bit, even though there's going to be no fans.
Yeah, it's good to see. I always like to measure up the Pac-12 to the other conferences. I talked about this before. I think of your Power 5 conferences, the Pac-12 is certainly the worst out of the 5. But I think the Pac-12 also has a bad reputation for them beating up on each other, cannibalizing themselves, and I don't think they're that much worse than the ACC and the Big 12, especially. I think they are worse, but the gap isn't as big as people think. I think a lot of the perspective around the country is that the Pac-12 is obviously the worst of the 5, when in reality, I think throughout the conference, 1 through 12, 1 through 10, however you shake it up, it's not really that far of a gap. And, well, we saw a Big 12 versus Pac-12 matchup yesterday in the Alamo Bowl. And Texas scored a lot of points, and they had a pretty dominant victory over Colorado. And that's very concerning if, we haven't seen the Pac-12 get to face anyone else for a long time. And, well, for the first time this season, pretty much, except for one other time. But we see Colorado not play well. And, Izzy, is it fair to take that Colorado performance and say that hurts the optimism that you may have for Oregon to do well? Or do you think that these are just completely separate games, and it's not fair to say Colorado lost by this many, by 30 points. This isn't looking good for the Pac-12 and Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon, Colorado, they didn't play against each other this season, so you definitely can't take that game into account to see how Oregon's going to play. 2 very different teams. They have not seen each other in a while, so actually they saw each other last year, but they haven't seen each other this season. So yeah, definitely take that out of context. Just think about that as just a separate Pac-12 game. This is a new Pac-12 game coming up January 2nd, where Oregon, they get to showcase why they are the best team in the Pac-12, playing against the top 10 ranked team in the country who's in the championship game of their own. So Oregon, they get to showcase why they're the best, and they get to prove why they're the best. So I'm really excited for this game because, again, it's a non-conference game. It's really good teams playing against each other.
Yeah, that's right. We are getting to see just 2 great teams. And Oregon, it's kind of funny. They sneak back into the rankings at number 25. Iowa State, though, they're number 10, and they're going to be big favorites as we finally kind of dive into what we expect to see from this Fiesta Bowl. Iowa State will be favored. Iowa State has had an interesting sort of season. They are one of the best, if not the best, 3-loss teams in the country, and that is noteworthy that they've lost 3 times. So let's look at who they've lost to. They had a really rough loss the first game of the season to Louisiana, and it wasn't a bad Louisiana team, but it wasn't a close game either. So that was a pretty brutal one for them to lose to the Ragin' Cajuns. But other than that, they lost to an Oklahoma State team that we saw performed well. I believe they won the they won the Cheez-It Bowl. They're a good team. They're a top 25 team. They lost a close game to Oklahoma State, and they lost in the Big 12 championship game to Oklahoma. So I kind of wanted to see Oregon face Oklahoma just for the matchup of those kind of big-time brands. But Oklahoma, they're playing right now in the matchup against Florida that is a lot more fitting. It's a better top 10 matchup for them. So I understand them taking the better opponent there. But we get Iowa State, the loser of the Big 12 championship game. But again, another really strong performance against Oklahoma. That's the thing about this Iowa State team is that they have these quality victories over Oklahoma earlier in the year as well, over Texas, who we just saw lay down a strong performance. They've got quality wins, and all of their losses are really tight, contested games. They're really good fights, and this is a team that is just really well put together, and you can't underestimate them just because they have 3 losses.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, their last loss to Oklahoma was very telling. I mean, they were trying to prove like they were the best team in the Big 10 or Big 12, and they were close. I mean, even though they had 2 losses and those are top 25 teams too. Raging Cajuns, they're legit this year. Oklahoma State, they kind of fell off with Chuba Hubbard opting out of the season. But this Iowa State team, their offense is really dangerous. I mean, they averaged around 33 points per game, and you look at Oregon, it's around 33 too. But then you have to take into account that Oregon had 3 really high-scoring games at the beginning of the season, and then they had 2 low-scoring games, which brought their average a little bit down. So you're looking at it, they put up similar amount of points. No, don't believe the averages at all. You have to look at the games and how they were played. And Iowa State, when they get going, they dominate teams. They don't let teams, especially their offenses, they don't let the offense get on the field. And if you keep offenses off the field, obviously they can't score, and then the defense gets tired being in the game so long, and then eventually you just keep grinding away and away, and then the defense, well, if they're tired, they can't really stop anyone. So you have to look at Oregon. Whenever they get the chance, their offense gets a chance to go on the field, it's a automatic, like, we have to score. That has to be the mindset of Joe Moorhead's offense, is that whenever we touch the field, we're going to score, because we're going to give this defense time to rest, time to breathe, time to catch your breath, time to talk about what they saw from the offense with their coordinators, with each other, so that they can make those adjustments in game, not just at halftime, so that it makes it tougher on Iowa State to score. So you're just wondering, what does Joe Moorhead have up his sleeve? Because, he always has a new game plan every week, especially now that looks like Anthony Brown's going to be involved a little bit more. So there might be more trick plays. You might see both quarterbacks being in the same play a few times, or at least once. So look out for those trick plays. But yeah, you're going to have trick plays to beat this Iowa State team, because beating them just head to head, especially if Verdell is not available, that's going to be really tough.
Yeah, trick plays, big plays, and discipline. You're going to need all 3. You're going to need something offensively that is creative, and I agree with you, Izzy. It'll be awesome to see both quarterbacks on the field at the same time. I want to see Joe Moorhead get creative. I mean, it's the Fiesta Bowl. Have some fun. Why not? Just go for it. It's the last game of the season, too, so that's always good when you don't have any more opponents. So whatever you haven't used in that playbook, use it. Just throw it out there, and that's always good to see. So offensively, I totally expect to see some creative stuff, and I expect to just experience what I've been experiencing all season, which is being very impressed with Joe Moorhead's play calling and what this Oregon offense is capable of. So I expect more of that. Defensively, you need big plays. You need to get those interceptions. I don't think they're going to get 3 turnovers like they did against USC, but you're going to need some. You're going to need to start that Oregon team with good field position. You're going to need to make some big stops. Something big has to happen because I know that this Oregon defense is going to give up a lot of yards. They're going to give up first downs. They're going to give up points. But whether or not they keep this team alive is getting those huge interceptions, something like that. And then the last thing is discipline. And that's just Tyler Shuck not turning the ball over. That's winning the penalties battle. That's converting in the red zone. And Izzy, I go back to USC again, but they did everything they needed to do against USC. They had the big play. They won the turnover margin. They won the penalties battle, and they converted every time they came to the red zone for touchdowns. They didn't have to settle for field goals. And that's how you win a football game, despite the fact that USC had more total yards across the board. So USC was better. They moved the ball better. They had more yards, but Oregon won the football game because of all those reasons. They need to check all those boxes again against Iowa State. And if they aren't checking all those boxes, I don't think this is a close game.
Yeah, and you look at Iowa State's quarterback, his touchdown to interception ratio is 2-1, which is not good at all. But then you look at Tyler Shucks, his isn't great either, but that gives rise to these DBs. We talked about before, Michael, these DBs love to be ball hawks. Whenever the ball's in the area, they try to make a play on the ball, whether it's swatting it down or trying to get a pick. And you think about Jamal Hill, he's been exceptional at that this season, and you hope that he's fine to play that game because you saw when he made that pick, it looked like he did something to his hamstring, whether he strained it or something like that. You hope that he's good to go, which is great that the game is January 2nd, gave Oregon all this time to rest and prepare for this game. But then you also look at one of Iowa State's linebackers, Mike Rose, who not only leads the team in tackles but interceptions. I mean, that's gonna be scary for Tyler Shuck because he loves to throw picks in the middle of the field to these linebackers or strong safeties. So look out, Michael. We might have some quarterbacks, a lot of interceptions this game. I'm thinking at least 2 interceptions this game by both quarterbacks. Just because of how good these defenses are looking against these quarterbacks. But then if Iowa State turns to the run game and Oregon can't stop that, Breece Hall, he's going to have a field day. I mean, he's close to 1,500 yards total on the season. Looking at how Oregon's faced against good running backs, they have not boded well. So you just hope that Oregon can at least shut one part of Iowa's offense down.
Yeah, and this is going to be a reality check for Oregon fans, and maybe you already know this, but let's remember here that Oregon beat a USC team that really wasn't that good, was a little overhyped because of the fact they were still undefeated, and they won that game because USC made a lot of mistakes and played a really bad game. Oregon is not supposed to do well against Iowa State. They are expected to lose by a lot of points. Iowa State, if they play the way that they know how to play, and if they play that we have seen them play all season, they're going to dominate this football game. Oregon is not going to do that well. So from an Oregon perspective, if this game is close at the end, regardless of what happens, that is a success. It would be really impressive if Oregon is able to make this a good football game, because I am not expecting this to be a very good football game. I think this is just one of those games where you sit back and we say, okay, Oregon finally ran into a team that was clearly better and that put it together and actually played a good game, unlike USC.
Yeah, and we will leave it at that as our time is up. We're really excited for this game to see how Oregon does. I know you Oregon fans are too, so make sure to catch our other episodes too. Make sure to check out sportspac12.com where you can find columns from all these Dash Sports hosts. Thank you for joining us today. Follow us at Dash Sports TV on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook, and check out our website at dashsports.tv.